The Vax-Curie ships appeared above Earth on a clear spring morning in 2157. They looked like giant silver teardrops hanging in the blue sky. People on Earth felt both excited and scared. This was humanity's first meeting with aliens. Captain Ta-Won Kim stood very straight and tall. Next to him was his M78 Thunderbolt tank, Earth's best fighting machine. The tank's big gun shone in the sunlight. Its metal sides had fresh paint for this important day. Ambassador Rail walked slowly around the tank. The alien had large eyes and a mouth with strange moving parts. These parts clicked together when the alien found something funny. "This is your best war machine?" asked Rail. "It still burns fuel and shoots metal bullets." Ta-Won did not answer. Behind him, his team looked at each other with worry. Gunner Jai-Ho Park crossed his arms. Driver Sang Mei Lee bit her lip. Communications expert Hyun-Woo Choi looked down at his boots. "Let us show you real fighting machines," said Rail. The aliens brought out their hover tanks. These amazing vehicles floated above the ground without touching it. They made no sound. Their weapons shot beams of energy that could melt a building from miles away. The alien tanks danced in the air. They changed color to match the sky. They fired their energy weapons at test targets, turning solid rock into clouds of steam. Commander Vex, the alien military leader, walked up to Ta-Won's tank. The alien ran a hand with 6 fingers over the metal side. "What an old thing," said Vex. "Maybe we should put it in our museum of old technology." All the aliens laughed. The sound hurt Ta-Won more than any wound he had ever gotten in battle. Later that day, Ambassador Rail stood before the world's leaders. "Earth will now have protected status," Rail said. "Your people have promise, but need our help to become advanced." Ta-Won watched the aliens leave. He put his hand on his tank's cold metal side. He knew his tank might not be fancy, but it was strong and reliable. Something inside him said that one day the aliens might need that strength. That night, Ta-Won met with his crew at the base. They sat together in the mess hall, pushing food around on their plates. "They think we're just stupid children," said Jai-Ho. "Did you see how they looked at our tank?" Sang-Mi nodded. "Like we were showing them a rock tied to a stick." "Their technology is amazing," said Hyun-Woo. "Those hover tanks don't even touch the ground. How can we compete with that?" Ta-Won put down his fork. "My grandfather told me stories about the mountain wars. His unit had new computerized rifles, but when the enemy used radio jammers, the fancy guns stopped working. The old mechanical rifles saved them." "What are you saying, Captain?" asked Sang-Mi. "I'm saying sometimes the old ways have strength the new ways don't," said Ta-Won. "The aliens think we're weak because our technology isn't like theirs, but different doesn't always mean worse." In the weeks that followed, the aliens shared some of their knowledge with Earth. They set up learning centers where humans could study alien science. They built a base on Mars and invited human scientists to visit. Ta-Won and his crew kept training with their tank. Other soldiers laughed at them. "Why bother?" they would say. "The aliens have flying tanks. Our machines will be in museums soon." But Ta-Won wouldn't stop. Every day, they practiced. They learned to fix the tank with basic tools. They'd practiced firing the main gun when the computer systems were turned off. They learned to drive using just mechanical controls. "If all our electronics failed, could we still fight?" Ta-Won would ask his crew. "Yes, Captain," they would answer. 3 months after the aliens arrived, Ta-Won was called to a meeting with General Da Jong-Yoon. "The Vax-Curie have invited a small group of human soldiers to visit their Mars base," said the general. "They want to show us how they train their forces. Your team has been chosen." "Why us, sir?" asked Ta-Won. "Ambassador Rail asked for you by name," said the general. "He said they want to show the less advanced human forces what real military training looks like." Ta-Won's face turned red. "They want to embarrass us again." "Maybe," said the general. But this is a chance to learn about their technology from the inside. Your orders are to watch, learn, and stay polite. And our tank, sir. They've agreed to transport it to Mars on one of their ships. They said something about comparing it to their museum pieces. The general gave a small smile. Show them what Earth soldiers can do, Captain, even with our outdated equipment. 2 weeks later, Ta-1 and his crew stood in the loading bay of a HFY ship. Their tank was being secured for the journey to Mars. Commander Vex watched with his arms crossed. "I'm surprised you still use this machine," said Vex. "Have you not studied our hover tank designs?" "We have," said Ta-1. "They're impressive. But this tank has been with us through many battles. We trust it." "Sentiment," said Vex. "An inefficient trait." As the ship prepared to leave Earth, Ta-1 looked out a window at his home planet. He didn't know why, but he had a strange feeling that bringing the old tank to Mars might turn out to be more important than anyone could guess. "Ready for Mars, Captain?" asked Sangmi. "Ready," said Ta-1, turning away from the window. "Let's show these aliens what humans and their outdated tanks can do." 6 months passed since the humans first met the HFY. Life on Earth changed fast as people learned from alien technology. Some humans worked on Mars now, helping at the alien base. Captain Ta-1 Kim and his tank crew had returned to Earth after their visit to Mars. They still trained with their old tank every day. Then one morning, all the screens on Earth showed the same emergency message. The alien colony on Mars was under attack. "We are facing an unknown enemy," said an alien officer with a damaged face. The message was breaking up. "They are crystalline life forms. They call themselves the Dreth." Pictures showed strange creatures made of crystal walking across the red Martian sand. They shone like diamonds in the sunlight, beautiful but deadly. "Their weapons generate quantum disruption fields," the alien continued. "Our systems are failing. Our hover tanks cannot move. Our energy weapons have no effect on their crystal bodies." The message cut off suddenly. Earth leaders quickly called an emergency meeting. Ta-1 and his crew were ordered to attend. In a big underground room, military leaders from around the world watched videos from Mars. Admiral Du Hyun Kang pointed at the screen. "Look at the alien hover tanks," he said. "They're just sitting there, useless." The video showed the amazing HFY tanks on the ground. Their lights were off. No energy weapons fired. Crystal creatures walked right past them, ignoring the once powerful machines. Science Director Mi Suk-yoon stood up. She was the top expert on alien technology. "The Dreth use fields that stop advanced electrical systems," she explained. "Anything with superconductors or energy weapons stops working. But simple mechanical systems might still work inside these fields." She pressed a button, and a picture of the M78 Thunderbolt tank appeared on the wall. Everyone stared at it. "You can't be serious," said General Jin Ho-ba. "You want to send our old tanks to Mars against an alien enemy?" "Our outdated technology might be exactly what we need," said Admiral Kang. "The Thunderbolt uses hydraulics and mechanical systems that could work in the disruption fields. Its main gun fires solid shells, not energy beams." General Ba shook his head. "It would be suicide. How would we even get the tanks to Mars?" "The HFY still have 3 transport ships that managed to escape," said Director Yoon. "They've requested our help. They can carry our tanks to Mars." All eyes turned to Ta-1. He sat straight in his chair. "Captain Kim," said Admiral Kang, "your crew has the most experience with both your tank and Mars conditions. Would you volunteer for this mission?" Ta-1 looked at his team. Ji-ho nodded firmly. Sang-mi gave a small smile. Hyun-woo looked scared but determined. "The Thunderbolt was built to fight," Ta-1 said. "Doesn't matter if it's on Earth or Mars." 3 days later, 12 Earth tanks were loaded onto HFY transport ships. The aliens looked confused as humans checked their tanks, filled them with fuel, and loaded shells into their guns. Commander Vex, who had once laughed at human technology, now watched the preparations in silence. "Will your weapons really work against the Dreth?" he finally asked Ta-1. "We'll find out," Ta-1 replied. "Your hover tanks are more advanced, but sometimes simpler is better." "Our colony is nearly overrun," said Vex. "We have 3,000 civilians trapped there. If your plan fails, they will all die." Ta-1 nodded. "We understand what's at stake." That night, before they left Earth, Ta-1 couldn't sleep. He walked to the hangar and climbed onto his tank. The metal felt cool under his hands. Sang-Me found him there an hour later. "Scared, Captain?" she asked, climbing up to sit beside him. "A little," he admitted. "We've never fought aliens before. The Vax Karai haven't either. Not these crystal ones," she said. "Maybe that's why they're losing. They think their advanced technology makes them unbeatable. And we know better." Sang-Me smiled. "We know tanks. Real tanks that drive on the ground and fire real shells. Tanks that work even when the computers fail." The journey to Mars took 2 days in the fast alien ships. As they approached the red planet, everyone gathered to look at the view screens. The Martian surface showed signs of battle. The dome of the Vax Karai colony was cracked in places. Crystal structures grew around it like strange flowers. Dead hover tanks lay scattered across the red sand. "The colony shield is failing," said the alien pilot. "We must hurry." As the ships landed at the edge of the colony, Ta-1 felt the deck shake. The Dreth were attacking the landing area. "All tank crews to your vehicles," ordered General Bai over the radio. "Prepare for immediate combat drop." Ta-1 and his crew ran to their tank. Through the ship's windows, they could see crystal creatures advancing toward them. The creatures glowed with strange inner light. "Remember your training," Ta-1 told his crew as they climbed into the tank. "Jai-Ho, check the main gun. Sang-Me, start the engine. Hyunwoo, try to establish radio contact with the colony." The familiar sounds of the tank coming to life filled Ta-1's ears. The engine rumbled. The turret moved as Jai-Ho tested it. "Communications are spotty, Captain," reported Hyunwoo. "The disruption fields are affecting our electronics, but the basic radio still works." "Hydraulics operational," said Jai-Ho. "Main gun ready." "Engine running smooth," said Sang-Me. "Ready to move." The ship's ramp began to lower. Red Martian light streamed in. Ta-1 took a deep breath. "All tanks, prepare to deploy," came General Baz's voice over the radio. "Remember, we're humanity's best hope right now. Let's show these crystal creatures what Earth tanks can do." "Forward," ordered Ta-1. With a roar of its engine, the Thunderbolt tank rolled down the ramp toward its first alien battle. Red dust flew everywhere as Ta-1's tank rolled down the ramp onto Mars. The ground was hard and rocky. The sky above was a dusty orange color. 11 other Earth tanks followed, spreading out on the red soil. The tanks were heavy. Their metal tracks left deep marks in the Martian dirt. Their engines made loud noises that echoed across the empty land. Mars had never heard such sounds before. "All tanks, move to Point Alpha," Ta-1 said into his radio. Point Alpha was a hill about 1 mile ahead. From there, they could see the alien colony. Inside the tank, Ta-1 looked through his periscope. He could see strange crystal shapes moving in the distance. These were the Dreth. The sun made rainbow colors flash across their bodies. They looked beautiful, but Ta-1 knew they were dangerous. The Dreth were heading toward the damaged dome of the Vax Karai colony. Inside that dome were thousands of aliens who had once laughed at human technology. Now those same aliens were hiding, their own weapons useless. "Captain, they've seen us," said Sang-Me from the driver's seat below. "I can see the disruption field coming our way. It looks like heat waves in the air." Ta-1 gripped the metal rail in front of him. This was the moment of truth. Would their tanks work where alien technology had failed? The wave of energy hit them. The tank's computer screens flickered and went dark. The radar stopped working, but the engine kept running. The turret still moved when Jiho turned the hand crank. The tank was still alive. "Systems check," called Tadwan. "Engine good," reported Sangmi. "Turret rotation working on manual," said Jiho. "Main gun operational. Basic radio still works," added Hyunwoo. "But no advanced communications." Taiwan smiled. Their plan was working. The tank's simple systems kept functioning even when the advanced electronics failed. Through his periscope, Taiwan saw a group of crystal beings moving toward them. These Dreth were bigger than the others. They seemed to be leaders. "Jiho, target the large group at 2 o'clock, ordered Taiwan. Jiho looked through his mechanical sight. No computers helped him aim. He used his eyes and hands, the way tank gunners had done for 100 years. "Target acquired," he said. "Firing." The tank shook as the main gun fired. The noise was huge, even in the thin Martian air. The shell flew straight and true. It hit the lid crystal being dead center. The Dreth commander exploded into thousands of shining pieces. The crystal creatures near it stopped moving, as if shocked. They had never been hit by a solid metal shell before. Their bodies, while strong against energy weapons, broke apart when hit by simple physical force. "Direct hit," shouted Jiho. "They're breaking up." The other Earth tanks were firing now too. Each shot shattered more crystal beings. The Dreth tried to respond. They sent more disruption fields toward the human tanks, but it made no difference. The tanks kept moving, kept firing. On a hill nearby, a group of Vax-Kuray soldiers watched with amazement. Their own hover tanks lay dead and useless around them. Yet these human machines, these primitive vehicles they had laughed at, rolled right through the disruption fields as if they weren't there. "All tanks, form a wedge," ordered Taiwan over the radio. "Like an arrowhead, we're pushing to the colony." The 12 tanks moved into position, forming a triangle with Taiwan's tank at the point. They drove forward together, crushing small crystal formations under their tracks. Their guns fired again and again. Inside the tank, it was hot and loud. The crew worked together like a well-oiled machine. Sangmi drove with skill, avoiding large rocks and keeping the tank steady. Jiho loaded and fired the main gun with practiced moves. Hyunwoo kept contact with the other tanks using the basic radio. "Look at them run," shouted Jiho as another group of Dreth scattered before their advance. Through a break in the crystal formations, Taiwan could see the colony dome. Parts of it were broken, but it still stood. Inside were the Vax-Kuray civilians, watching as human tanks fought to save them. A large crystal structure rose up in front of them, blocking their path. It looked like a wall, 20 feet high. "All tanks, concentrate fire on the center of the wall," ordered Taiwan. 12 tanks fired at once. The noise was like thunder. The crystal wall cracked but didn't fall. "Again," ordered Taiwan. They fired a second volley. More cracks appeared in the crystal wall. "One more time," said Taiwan. "Fire." The third volley broke through. The crystal wall fell apart, opening a path to the colony. "Forward," Taiwan ordered. As they drove through the gap, Taiwan saw movement to their right. A group of Dreth had formed into a spear-like shape and was charging toward them. "Tank 4, look out," he called over the radio, but it was too late. A crystal spear hit Tank 4 in the side. Sharp crystal points pierced the metal armor. The tank stopped moving. "Tank 4 is hit," reported Hyunwoo. "They're not responding." "Keep moving," ordered Taiwan. "We can't stop." The remaining tanks pushed on, getting closer to the colony with each minute. The Dreth changed their tactics. Instead of facing the tanks directly, they tried to surround them. "They're learning," said Hyunwoo. "They're adapting to our weapons." "Then we adapt too," replied Taiwan. "All tanks, break formation. Spread out and keep moving. Don't stay still for more than 10 seconds." The human tanks scattered, making it harder for the Dreth to target any one of them. They kept firing, kept advancing toward the colony. Finally, they reached the broken edge of the dome. Up close, Ta-1 could see Vax Curie faces pressed against the clear sections, watching the battle. "We've reached the colony," Ta-1 reported to base. "Beginning perimeter defense." The tanks formed a circle around the damaged part of the dome. They turned their guns outward, ready to fight off any Dreth that approached. For now, they had won the first battle. Human tanks, old-fashioned, simple, and primitive, had succeeded where advanced alien technology had failed. But Ta-1 knew this was just the beginning of the war. Inside the colony, Ambassador Rail watched the Earth tanks with new respect in his large eyes. The machines he had once mocked were now all that stood between his people and destruction. For 3 days and nights, the human tanks guarded the broken alien dome. They moved in circles around it, never stopping for long. When the Dreth attacked, the tanks fired back. Their big guns boomed across the red Martian land. Inside the dome, Earth engineers helped the Vax Curie build new weapons. They taught the aliens how to make simple guns that fired metal bullets. These guns didn't need fancy electronics. They would work even in the disruption fields. "See, just like this," said an Earth engineer to a group of watching aliens. The firing pin hits the bullet. The powder explodes. The bullet flies out. No computers needed. The aliens watched with big eyes. They had forgotten such simple ways. For hundreds of years, they had only used energy weapons. Outside, Ta-1's tank crews stayed alert. They took turns sleeping. They ate quick meals of dried food. They checked their tank every hour to make sure everything still worked. On the morning of the 4th day, Hyunwoo was watching the radio. Most electronics didn't work well, but they had made a simple radio that could still pick up basic signals. "Captain, wake up," Hyunwoo called. "I'm getting strange readings from the south." Ta-1 jumped up from his short nap. He climbed to his spot and looked through the periscope. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible." In the distance, something huge was moving toward them. It looked like a mountain made of crystal. It shone in the sunlight, sending rainbow colors across the red land. But this was no mountain. It was moving. "Incoming," shouted Hyunwoo to the other tanks. Massive Dreth formation approaching from the south. Ta-1 kept watching through his periscope. The crystal mountain was actually thousands of Dreth creatures joined together. They had formed a giant war machine. It crawled slowly toward the colony on hundreds of crystal legs. "All tanks, concentrate fire on the central part," ordered Ta-1. All 11 tanks turned their guns toward the huge crystal structure. They fired together. The noise was like the biggest thunder ever heard on Mars. Their shells hit the crystal mountain. Pieces broke off, but the damage wasn't enough. The huge structure kept coming. "Fire again," ordered Ta-1. The tanks fired a second time, and a third, and a fourth. Each time, they broke off pieces of crystal. But the mountain was too big. It fixed itself as it moved, growing new crystal to replace what was lost. "It's not working," said Jai-ho. "We need to try something else." Ta-1 thought fast. What would hurt this thing? Their shells could break individual Dreth, but this combined form was too strong. Then he saw it. In the middle of the crystal mountain was a glowing ball of light. It looked different from the rest. "That's it," said Ta-1. "The central control node. If we can destroy that, the whole thing might fall apart." But the node was protected inside the crystal structure. Their shells couldn't reach it from this distance. "We need to get closer," decided Ta-1. "Driver, take us to Point Bravo." Point Bravo was a small hill directly in the path of the crystal mountain. From there, they might be able to hit the central node. "Captain, that's very dangerous," said Sangma. "We'll be right in front of that thing." "I know," said Ta-1, "but it's our only chance. The rest of you can stay here." "We're coming with you," said Jai-ho. The others nodded. All other tanks provide covering fire, ordered Ta-1 over the radio. We're going for the central node. Sang-Mei pushed the engine hard. The tank roared forward, leaving the safety of the perimeter. The other tanks fired past them, keeping some of the Dreth busy. The Crystal Mountain saw them coming. It sent smaller crystal formations to stop them. Sharp crystal spikes shot up from the ground in front of the tank. "Hold on," shouted Sang-Mei as she drove around the spikes. They were getting closer to the mountain now. Tai-1 could see the central node clearly. It glowed with a strange blue light. "We're taking damage," warned Hyunwoo. Sharp crystal shards were hitting their tank. Some broke through the armor. One shard came through the side of the tank, missing Hyunwoo's head by inches. "Keep going," ordered Ta-1. "We're almost in position." They reached Point Bravo and turned to face the Crystal Mountain. It was very close now, its shadow falling over them. "Ready main gun," said Ta-1. "Target the central." A huge crystal spike shot up from the ground, hitting the tank's left side. The whole tank shook. There was a terrible noise of metal breaking. "Left tread is gone," shouted Sang-Mei. "We can't turn anymore." "Forward systems damage," reported Hyunwoo. "Fuel leaking." Tai-1 looked through his periscope. Despite the damage, they were in a perfect position to hit the node, but they would need to get even closer for a sure shot. "Can we still move forward?" he asked Sang-Mei. "Yes, but not for long," she answered. "The engine is overheating." Tai-1 made a hard choice. Driver set course directly for the central node. Full speed. His crew looked at him. They understood what this meant. They were going to drive right into the Crystal Mountain. "Gunner, prepare all remaining shells," said Tai-1. "We'll fire point blank into the node." Jai-Ho nodded and loaded the last shell into the gun. "It's been an honor serving with you all," he said quietly. "Same here," said Sang-Mei as she pushed the damaged tank forward. "For Earth," said Hyunwoo. The tank rolled toward the Crystal Mountain on its one good tread. The engine screamed as it worked too hard. Smoke came from the broken side. The Crystal Mountain tried to stop them. More spikes rose up. More shards hit the tank, but they kept moving. "Almost there," said Ta-1. "Get ready." They hit the base of the Crystal Mountain. The tank started to climb up the slope of crystal. The engine made terrible noises. The remaining tread fought for grip on the smooth crystal surface. "Now," shouted Ta-1 when they were right in front of the glowing node. Jai-Ho fired the main gun. At such close range, the shell went straight into the central node. There was a bright flash of blue light. The Crystal Mountain shook. Cracks spread through it like lightning. The blue light flickered and went out. "It's working," shouted Hyunwoo. "The structure is breaking apart." But their tank was breaking too. The engine finally gave out. Fire spread from the broken tread to the fuel tanks. "Everyone out," ordered Ta-1. "Through the top hatch." The crew climbed up and pushed open the hatch. Around them, the Crystal Mountain was falling apart. Thousands of individual Dreth creatures fell from the structure, confused without their central control. The human tanks at the perimeter saw the Crystal Mountain collapse. They cheered over the radio, but then they saw the smoke coming from Ta-1's tank. "Tank 1 is hit bad," called a voice over the radio. "Send rescue team immediately." The tank was burning now. The crew had only seconds to escape. Tai-1 pushed his team through the hatch first. Sang-Mei went out, then Jai-Ho, then Hyunwoo. Just as Tai-1 started to climb out himself, the tank exploded. The other tank crews watched in horror. Surely no one could have survived that blast. They rushed forward to look for survivors. But then, from the burning wreckage of the Thunderbolt tank, a hatch opened. A hand appeared, then an arm, then a head covered in soot and blood. Tai-1 pulled himself out of the destroyed tank. Behind him came the rest of his crew, all injured but alive. They had done the impossible. They had defeated the Crystal Mountain. The tide of the battle had turned. 2 weeks after the big battle, Tai-1 stood in a large room on Earth. He needed crutches to stand. His left leg was broken in 3 places. His face had burns that were still healing. But he was alive. Next to him stood his crew. Ji-ho had his arm in a cast. Sang-mei had bandages on her hands. Hyun-woo's head was partly shaved where the doctors had fixed a wound. They had almost died on Mars. After their tank exploded, they lay in the red dust, hurt and bleeding. It was the Vax-Kurai soldiers who saved them. The same aliens who had once laughed at their primitive tank carried them to safety. Now Admiral Kang stood before them. The old man held 4 shiny medals. "For bravery above and beyond duty," said the Admiral as he pinned the first medal on Tai-1's chest. "For saving not just our world, but 2 worlds." The room was full of people. Human soldiers and leaders stood on one side. Vax-Kurai officials stood on the other. They all clapped as each crew member got a medal. Ambassador Rael stepped forward. The alien looked different now. The easy pride was gone from his eyes. "The Dreth have left Mars," Rael announced. "Their ships were seen leaving the solar system 2 days ago. We believe they will not return." The room filled with cheers. The war was over. Both Earth and Mars were safe. "This victory belongs to humans," continued Rael. "When our technology failed, yours succeeded. When our weapons were useless, yours proved powerful." The alien turned to face Tai-1 directly. Then, to everyone's surprise, Rael bowed deeply at the waist, just like humans do. "We were wrong about your species," said Rael. "What we called primitive was actually reliable. What we thought was outdated was perfectly suited for fighting the Dreth. Our new alliance will be between equals, not between protector and protected." Tai-1 nodded, accepting the apology. He remembered the laughter of the aliens when they first saw his tank. Now that same tank had saved them all. 1 month later, Tai-1 returned to Mars. The red planet looked peaceful now. The broken dome was fixed. No crystal creatures walked the red sand. A ceremony was taking place at the spot where his tank had exploded. What remained of the thunderbolt had been cleaned and placed on a large stone base. A sign in both human and Vax-Kurai writing told the story of the battle. "A proper memorial," said General Ba, who stood beside Tai-1. "Your tank earned its place in history." But Tai-1 was more interested in what stood next to the memorial. It was a new vehicle, unlike anything he had seen before. It had the basic shape of an Earth tank, with treads and armor and a main gun. But parts of it shone with Vax-Kurai technology. Its engine was quieter. Its armor was stronger. "The first of the new joint species tanks," explained General Ba. "Human mechanical systems protected by Vax-Kurai armor. Simple controls backed up by advanced computers that can be turned off if needed." Painted on the side of the new tank was a name: Kim's Thunder. Tai-1 smiled when he saw it. His tank crew gathered around him, all healed now and ready for new missions. Ambassador Rael approached them. "Do you like the new design, Captain Kim? Your engineers and ours have been working day and night to perfect it." "It's beautiful," said Tai-1. "The best of both worlds." They watched as mixed crews of humans and Vax-Kurai climbed into the new tanks. The machines rolled out for a training exercise, moving smoothly across the Martian landscape. "Sometimes the old ways still have power," Tai-1 remarked as they watched. "Not everything new is better." "A lesson we will not forget," replied Rael. "The universe is big and full of surprises. To call something old and useless is itself a primitive way of thinking." In the distance, the new tanks fired their main guns. The sound rolled across the red plains like thunder. It was the same sound Tai-1's old tank had made, the sound that had saved Mars. 6 months later, a Vax-Kurai science ship found another world with signs of the Dreth. This time, they didn't go alone. Earth tanks led the way, with Tai-1 commanding the first joint human-alien tank division. His new tank was bigger and better than his old Thunderbolt, but he had insisted on one thing: it still used tracks, not hover technology. It still had a big gun that fired real shells, and it could still work when all the fancy systems failed. As they approached the new world, Ambassador Rail stood beside Taiwan on the bridge of the ship. "Are you nervous, Captain?" asked the alien. "No," said Taiwan, looking at the planet growing larger in the view screen. "We're ready for anything now." The ship's speakers announced landing procedures. Taiwan turned to go to his tank. His crew waited for him, ready as always. "Good hunting, Captain Kim," said Rail. "May your thunder be heard across many worlds." Taiwan smiled and headed for the vehicle bay. The sound of tank engines filled the air, the sound of two species working together, stronger than either was alone. The end.